My arrangement is I worked with Bob at Scotiabank. I also spent time with him at the CBA when I was on the executive council for a while after he went over there. And I actually played at least one or maybe two games of tennis with him, with Louise's brother Bill, back when I could still do things like that. But obviously the main thing was Scotia. When I joined Scotia in '68 and came to Toronto in '69, the bank had virtually no people with university degrees. So Bob was a bit of the odd man out amongst all of the traditional bankers. And I came in with an MBA. I wasn't the first MBA there, but others were off doing other things. And so I don't know, Bob took a bit of a shine to me, I think, perhaps because of that. And he became the closest thing, I ever had to a mentor. I don't think I ever had a real mentor, but Bob would have been the closest thing to that. And he kind of looked out for me. And we would chat about the bank and the world and all of those things, and over many years. And I made the comment to the Globe, which then Helen picked up, that one of the things I remember so vividly was his championing of hiring women for the bank, which at that time was really quite revolutionary. We didn't have any women in management. And of course, as I said, we didn't have very many people with university degrees either. And Bob was pushing that as well. So it was a great experience. I think he made a huge contribution to Scotiabank and certainly helped my career, which went on for some of you may know, for 40 odd years with the bank, culminating with the position of vice chair. And great career for me, and great experience knowing Bob McIntosh.
Wonderful, thank you. Louise, on to you.
Okay, well, as you probably heard Bob mention, my brother Bill worked for the Bank of Nova Scotia for a couple of years before he went back to university, and subsequently became a university professor. But he worked as Bob McIntosh's assistant. And I graduated with my MBA in '72. And I guess my brother said something about, I got a sister who's got a degree. And I joined the bank in the investment department. And Bob McIntosh was, he had the investment department under his portfolio, and I got to know him. And I want to echo what Bob said, he was a real champion of women. A number of years later, in the Canadian business magazine, this is backwards or something, but there's an article, there's a picture of Bob and me in this magazine, which is about mentorship.
Oh, wow.
And, but it is kind of interesting because it starts out, Bob saying, I hired Louise Cann directly. It was 1972 or so. Her older brother, Bill, had worked for me. He was about the brightest trainee I'd met. So I'm not sure, but he had to settle for the sister. So anyway, one of the things that I wanted to really say is, yes, he did champion women. And there are a number, myself, Helen, Candace Craddock, who I thought was going to be on the call, but doesn't seem to have made it. Any number of women. He was a great mentor. I mean, he was able to actually say things that in kind of a nice way. Like, he would always sort of tell me, Louise, you're too blunt. You've got to be a little more gracious about how you're telling people that they aren't working out. And so anyway, but I want to tell you actually a story that has nothing to do with the bank. I mean, he was a great banker, and he brought a level of professionalism to the CBA that, was just made it one of the most powerful lobbying forces. I mean, he's very fine professional man. But one day, Helen and I got to know each other through Bob McIntosh. And many of us on this call know each other, and we know each other in part because Bob brought people together. Well, it's a Friday night, and Helen and I are playing squash together at Toronto Lawn Tennis. And lo and behold, Bob's watching us. And as we come off the court, he says, "Oh, that was terrifying." We both had these wide tennis swings. And he said, "You guys look like two helicopters in an enclosed space." And then he said, "And where are your swains?" And that's a kind of an archaic word. And Helen sort of looked at me and said, "What's a swain?" And I said, "Well, it's kind of an old-fashioned word for boyfriend." And we just said we preferred to play squash with each other. So lo and behold, about a week and a half later, Helen and I are invited to a skating party at the Macintoshes. And it's a neighborhood skating party. There are neighbors, and there's the kids. You can sort of figure out why everybody's there. And Helen and I can sort of see, I guess, well, we both work for Macintosh. I guess we've been invited. That's the reason we're there. And I was slow on the uptake here, and I guess Helen was actually too. As we're sort of skating around, we keep noticing about 6 or 7 young men about our age. And I can't figure out what any of them are doing here. So anyway, finally, I actually asked one of them, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "I don't know. I know Bob from the Toronto Law. He just said I was supposed to come here." So we go back to the house, and all of a sudden, Macintosh keeps dragging these guys up to Helen and me, and he does the introduction, but sort of he sort of says, "Rising young lawyer, fine family." And we sort of realized, oh my God, all these people are suitors that have been dragged to this party to meet us. But unfortunately, that night, Helen and I did have swains. We each had a date that night. So we had to leave early. And I guess that just left Macintosh with 6 young men who wondered why on earth they'd been invited to a family skating party. But this was very typically Bob. I mean, he really looked out for his people. He looked out for them on the job, and he was prepared to look out for them, off the job as well. And I had fine times working with Bob.
Wonderful, Louise. And on to David.
Thank you for this opportunity, Helen, and thank you for organizing it. It's wonderful. Yeah, I joined the CBA. I guess Bob had been president for a few months before I joined. For others who don't know, I became the general counsel after a while, and I was the general counsel for most of the time that Bob was the president. I guess what I remember was one of my first senior staff meetings at the Canadian Bankers Association. And these were meetings that were held every Monday morning of the week. And I can't remember what time they started, but I do remember them as being quite early, at least early for me. And I wasn't part of the senior staff initially, but every once in a while I would sit in for Gordon Reed, who was the top legal counsel there at the time. And it was either the first or the second meeting. I wasn't in the habit of getting beyond the sports pages of the Globe and Mail in the morning. And I showed up at one of these meetings, and in the course of the meeting, it became quite clear that I was completely ignorant of something important that had happened over the weekend and that we should know about. And Bob sort of leaned over and said, "David, you're expected when you attend one of these meetings to have read the newspaper in the morning." And he may have put it more pointedly. It certainly brought about a very severe behavior modification. And so at every day thereafter, I was certain to read the Globe and Mail from cover to cover. And it is so indelibly imprinted on my behavior that it still carries on, even though I don't have to now. But it was something that I remember. I also remember a quote that Bob would say from time to time, and it's not an original, but he said it in such a way, and you can fill in the blanks, but I think of it in these times that we are in right now. He would refer to somebody, he would say, whenever that person speaks, they detract from the sum of human knowledge. And And I think in those days, there weren't that many people in that category, but there are a lot of people you can put in that category now. I think at the end of the day, and I remember those senior staff meetings, those were wonderful conversations. Those are a highlight of my work period. We carried them on with Helen and Joanne, and I carried it on, and they became kind of an institution, but they were wonderful. And working with Bob was just great fun. I really enjoyed it, and a highlight of my career. So
Wonderful.
that's my
Here,
recollection.
Yeah, here.
Joanne, on to you.
I'm next. Okay. Well, it's good to see everybody. It's just bringing back so many great memories, really. So I joined the CBA in 1985 in public affairs. And I think, Helen, it was really because of you that Bob hired me. I was working at Queen's Park as chief of staff to a minister. And I think at some point, you probably thought that a political perspective might be helpful. And so I have so many stories about Bob that because he felt, first of all, he felt that when I joined, one of the first things he'd said to me as I was giving him my perspective on how we might approach a political issue, he'd said to me, "You have too much respect for Crown authority." Like, that's just too much respect for Crown authority. They don't deserve it, you know. So that sort of sets up what I'm about to tell you. And the other part of this story, that the setup is that you may recall Terry Corcoran and Patricia Best. I can't remember which one of them wrote this in one of their Financial Post articles, but it was the exact quote was that Bob McIntosh was the only bull who brought his own china shop to an argument.
Oh, I remember that.
vividly.
It might not have been.
That comment,
I think it was
Joanne,
High
you had
Solomon.
not.
It was High Solomon, yeah.
High Solomon.
Was it High Solomon? Okay,
Yeah.
I couldn't remember. I was, yeah. So this was, and those of us who worked with him on the public affairs and issues and trying to put issues, responses together, really appreciated that comment because it was so on point. But here's one of the best experiences, one of the best episodes, I should say, that illustrates that was he and I went to appear before a parliamentary committee in Ottawa. It was the time during the fees, the bank fee debate. You will all remember that because it went on and on and on, and it was extremely painful, right? It was really quite a harsh time for the banks. It didn't matter what paper you were reading, Globe and Mail, Star, whatever. The banks were being hammered over it. So we appeared before the committee, and afterwards we did a press conference, and he was being asked questions, and he was raising his hands and shouting and arguing back, and there was a glass of water right in front of him, and at one point he just went bam, and it went flying across the audience, and everybody just kind of stopped. And he just nonchalantly looked at me and said, like, "Over to you, you can take the next question." And he just sat and waited for the next question. And he just loved that, that getting into those arguments. And on the way home, we actually, Robin Cordos was with us because he was chairman of the CBA at the time, and he had flown in his the TD jet, so he gave us a lift home to Toronto, and we just laughed about that glass, scratching across the press conference all the way home. So that was Bob. But the thing about Bob was that underneath it all, he was really one of the kindest and soft-hearted individuals I've ever known. And I was really quite privileged and delighted to be able to keep that friendship going until until near the end, because we had a lovely dinner with he and Lynn, David and Helen and I guess it was April or May. I can't remember.
No, it was January. It was earlier this year. Yeah.
Oh, no, that was earlier this year.
Pre-COVID.
That's right. It
It was
was
January.
pre-COVID.
Yeah.
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 And he still, notwithstanding the fact that he couldn't get around very well. It was just still really a lot of fun. We laughed a lot that day.
yeah.
So that's my memory of Bob, that he was just a character.
Great, John. Thank you. And John, over to you.
Well, thanks very much for having me. It's I was business editor at Global Television for 15 years and again at CBC for a while. And I never got to meet Bob for some strange reason, but he had the great reputation as one of the fine gentlemen and in the whole lobby business, let's put it that way. And he obviously was extremely smart. And so we weren't able to get the kind of quotes from him that we would normally get, because he wasn't full of the BS like so many of the others were, as you can appreciate. But my personal involvement with him occurred when I, under great pressure from my wife in retirement, I joined the Toronto Lawn Tennis Club. And I had said to myself, I am not a club member, a club kind of person, and I didn't really play tennis. Anyway, I joined, and some people said, well, what you've got to do, you've got to learn some of the rudimentaries of tennis, and then you've got to start to play some games. And they put me in touch with a group they affectionately called the Old Farts. Well, it turns out I was the youngest old fart in the group. And I was playing with people like Alan Fotheringham and Bob McIntosh. And of course, I was thrilled to meet Bob finally, after having known him for so long through the media. And we got to know each other quite well. And he taught me a lot about tennis. Both Bob and Alan had this knack. They couldn't move very well. Neither of them could move very well. But if the ball came anywhere near them, it would come back at you like a rocket. So I ended up playing a lot with Bob rather than against him for a number of reasons. I could move a little bit to help him out because he, as I say, he didn't move all that well. And then after tennis, we'd get together and we would chat. And when he found out I was born in Toronto, he took a great delight in telling me about the history of Toronto. And then he gave me his book.
Oh, yeah.
You probably
Oh,
know this
yes.
book. It's just
Yeah.
terrific. But the most interesting thing was one day we're talking and he said, of course, you know, we're related. And I said, I'm sorry. And it turns out that he is a cousin of one of my brother's, well, his late wife. And so through marriage, we had this relationship. So it was kind of special being with Bob on the tennis court, learning a lot about the game, learning a lot about him, and just enjoying his company overall. And I really appreciated it.
Wonderful story.
That's great, John. Thank you. So, so for people who just joined a little late, Nada, I'm assuming Mark's there. I can see Lisa. Did anybody else join after we began? We were going to just run through these quick memories. In a minute, we're going to raise our glass, and then anybody else who would like to say anything, we would be all ears and would welcome your contribution. So I joined Louise, Joanne, Lynn, Lisa, Anna as being one of Bob's girls or women, and like them, I would say that was a real privilege. And I would say for me, it was really the pillar of my career at the bank and then at the CBA. So obviously, very, very grateful for it. I do have one memory, would tell you that yes, he championed us, but he was a little cowed by the female genre as well. And that was a day when I was sitting in my office. This is still at the bank. And I got a call to say, would I come down to his office? He had a guest coming in, and the guest turned out to be Bluma Appel. That those of you who are older will remember as a rather forceful woman who was looking for, in this case, she was looking for a seat on the Bank of Nova Scotia board. And the reason I was invited was that Bob didn't want to confront her on his own. He was looking for a buffer. And so I came down, and the first thing she said was, well, oh, I think I must have come down with somebody else. I think there must have been two in the room, because she said to Bob, who are those girls? and he stood his ground. And so she went through her proposition, and that was, she said, I'll never forget, she said, Bob, those days, it took $100,000 in bank stock to become a director. And she said, Bob, I could write the check on my petty cash. So I was thinking, as I was giving thought to today, that today being November the 6th is exactly a month since Bob died. And I think the thing that would have really ticked them off about his timing was that he would have missed the US election, which may well get resolved tonight. But you know, Bob was a tremendously political guy, and he loved politics. And I remember in one of my visits to see him, right after the US midterms, he said, Joe Biden is going to win. Now, this is the midterms. This is well before COVID. Trump was riding high.
2018.
He said Joe Biden is going to win. And he said, it's the women who are going to vote him in. And so, you know, among all the prognostications about this election, that is one that hasn't been talked about a lot, except they talk about the suburban women. But actually, we all know now that back in 2018, Bob McIntosh, before any of these pundits, was calling the election. And as it turns out tonight, he will have called it right.
There is.
Right.
That is incredible.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
I wish you told me, Helen, I wish you told me that 2 years ago.
Oh, it saved me a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
Yes.
Lisa headed our Washington office back in the good old days, so she may say a word or two in a minute. But let us all raise our glass and honor our friend, leader, and mentor. So to Bob.
To Bob.
Bob.
On to the next phase here. I see Tema Frank has joined us. There's Lisa, Nada and Mark. Anna's here. Who else? Lynn, who else would have a memory to offer before we get shut down?
Can you hear me okay? Is everyone hear me okay?
Is that Mark?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Not great, but can you hear me? Okay. Okay. You may recall.
Well, there you are.
Glenn Carter?
We're not hearing you, Mark.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Sorry. The microphone's not working very well.
There we go.
Hear you, Bill.
Sorry, I can't. It's on microphone.
If you send me something in writing, I'll get it added to it.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, Lisa, Tema, Lynn.
Well, I
Anna.
would just like to add that, and this is totally spontaneous, but Bob terrified me. He really did. he had a way of just like turning to you and saying, and what do you think about that? And, or, you know, it just as David was recounting about reading the paper in the morning, if God forbid you'd miss something that was on his radar, oh my God. Truly, I lived in fear of him for quite a while. And but he was honestly a wonderful mentor. He had a way of just simply cutting to the chase and telling you point blank, without being offensive, where he thought you needed to improve. You know, what could be polished off and made just a little bit smoother. And I'm grateful to him to this day. I do remember his stewardship. I remember his leadership, and I just remember what a wonderful number of years it was and what fun it was working at the CBA. It was just, you know, I think, and this is sort of a tribute to it, right? We're one big family. Yes, we're very dispersed and we haven't seen each other for God knows how long, but all still very connected and very, very much connected by this man, right? Who was a very powerful presence. So God bless him. I learned a lot from him.
Hear, hear.
Wonderfully said. Wonderfully said. And anyone else?
I would just mention that, you know, in this so different age, Bob was a gentleman of the old school. You know, he was a classy guy, and he is, as it was just said, he could say blunt things, but he could say them in a nice, positive way that actually was constructive. It moved the path forward. You know, too bad we can't go back to those good old times.
Yeah.
Just one other.
And, you know, I would add one other thing about that, to Louise's point. He was also a Renaissance man in the sense that he just had so many interests, there was so much that he knew about, and he shared that with all of us. So, and Renaissance people just aren't around anymore. So that's the other amazing thing about Bob.
And he kind of expected you to be up to that level too. That was the scary part.
Yeah. Just you know,
Yes, he certainly challenged us.
Louise made a comment that, you know, one of the things Bob used to say to her was, don't be too blunt. You know, you gotta, I just want to tell you, I got the same message many times.
That's what you can learn from it, Bob.
Well, Michael, what can I say?
I found that that's the most hilarious comment though, because who was blunter than Bob?
Exactly.
Not many people.
Yeah.
Anybody remember? Does
Yeah.
anybody remember during the Blencarn hearings, when Blencarn was chair of the committee, looking at bank powers, I think it was, and Bob appeared before the committee, and he was just as blunt and as direct as his trademark style. And Blinky turned around and looked at someone and said, you know, Bob, you have a way of rubbing the pussycat the wrong way. I
forgot that.
Remember that? Oh, God.
Lisa, do you have any insight from your perch in upstate New York?
About Bob or the elections?
You choose. You choose.
I think Bob is far more important right now. I think, and I wrote this to you, Helen, what is so extraordinary to me, you know, this is now 30 plus years ago, seeing, and he was, and somebody may have said this already before I joined, but it truly was extraordinary to me that this gentleman, who was the same age as my father would also be 97. Anyway, at that time, he was looking out for and encouraging and growing and all these young women. And when he was a neighbor of my family, so we knew them, or my parents knew them socially, and he sort of kept tabs on me. And when he heard that I had finished at the Canadian Opera Company at the time and was sort of casting about, he said, well, no, I think you should look at the Canadian Bankers Association. And I looked at him and didn't quite ask, but I was at the stage, all of whatever it was, 25, 26, where I went, what's a bank association? And what do you mean you want me to be a secretary? Because he was talking about being a secretary to one of the banking committees, which ended up being Joanne De Laurentiis, her public affairs committee. But just for his age, his sex, his time, to be caring, to be and curious and wanting to support talent wherever he found it, or if I can include myself in your group in that way, that was just remarkable to me, especially given what we see so often. Well, anyway, not to talk about politics.
Perfect. Thank you.
So, and I don't know if you can see it because it's going to be tough, but this is, and Helen knows this, this is my favorite. Let me see if there we go.
Oh, that's a great picture.
Yeah.
That was Bob and Helen at my wedding.
I told Lisa that had a position of honor in our condo for a long time before Paul told me that I should take it down and put one up that figured him instead. Well, I think we're about to be shut down.
So Helen, I do have one quick one about him being blunt. He was also really blunt to the banker. So I don't know if you remember and it was during, Lynn just reminded me, during the Blencarn hearings, and a woman, an elderly woman went in to get quarters for laundry, and the bank, the Scotiabank charged her $2 on a $20 of quarters. And of course it made the papers. Said Richie was so embarrassed. He sent her a bouquet of flowers, which was, I think, probably too late at that point, of course. But he said to me, you know, I called Sid and told him, because Sid was so embarrassed that the branch would do that in the middle of these hearings, right? It was all over the papers. So I said, I called Sid and I said to him, you know what? You may think you have your hand on the levers of, but I've got news for you. They're not, it's not connected to anything.
Well, we're about to be shut down. So anybody else? Catherine.
I had started off just as Bob was soon going to retire. I worked under Dave Phillips. I found him a fascinating person. I never met anyone quite like Bob McIntosh. I still have his book, and I was rereading some of it. I now understand it. He was a joy. He was intimidating to a brand new lawyer, but David was awesome to work for. Joanne, it was a great experience, and I remain friends with many of the people I met in my decade at the CBA.
Wonderful, thank you.
Great.
And
I just want to add that Lynn Buckle just shook my world up here by what I've just heard today, because we all found you so intimidating.
Oh, geez.
That's true.
And if I ever do manage to write a work of fiction, perhaps in some ways he planted the seed. I remember sitting in his office one day and we were talking about some senior banker who had apparently allegedly died in a boating accident. And he looked at me deadpan and said, "You don't think that was actually an accident, do you?" So I've been playing with that idea for a novel for decades.
Temo's probably the one among us who's actually become an author. I'm not sure anybody else has, but go for it, Temo, I'll buy it.
That brings to mind something, actually, Helen. Bob was really instrumental in pushing me to write my memoir, which I've been doing for many years now, and it's about to be published or self-published early in the new year. But he was the one who said, because we used to share stories about Toronto and other things, and he's the one who said, look, you've got to do something with this. You just can't not do it. People are going to be interested. So my memoir is coming out early next year, and I think Bob had a lot to do with it.
Oh, fabulous.
Good for you.
So you can send us an Amazon link, John.
Will do, Helen.
We're in.
Good to hear.
We're in.
Okay, well, they seem to have given us another minute or two. Is there anybody else? Michael, who hasn't spoken? Anybody
Michael.
else? And Anna Venster Benzie.
I'll just maybe echo Lynn's comments that Bob scared the crap out of me when I first started. He was a very intimidating man, strong intellect, but he was definitely a guiding light in my career. And to the extent that he mentored Bob, who was also a guiding light in my career once I went to Scotia, I'm forever grateful to him and the opportunities that he gave me. And yeah, no, I think we had a great time at the CBA the 5 years I was there, and the young team with, Tenma was there at the time, and Tony Goulman and Barb Amston and all the others. So a great way to start my career. And the words that he taught me, went on to be formative once I went to Scotia. So very much appreciated.
He got you prepared for the culture.
You bet.
Michael decided to go from the frying pan into the fire, Helen.
Oh, I just wanted to say too, Jan Hall had really wanted to be here tonight because she really admired and enjoyed working for Bob. She had a conflict, but she does have very fond memories of working at the CBA at that time.
Thank you, Catherine. Well, I'm going to suggest we sign off, but Mark.
Thank you, Helen, for organizing.
Yes, thank you so much, Helen.
Thank you very much.
Well, I'm just going to say, anybody who has anything you'd like to pass on, he will be getting the file, this tape. And so if there's any written word you'd like to go with it, please let me know. And thank you all so much. This was a lot of fun. And I think Bob would have greatly enjoyed it.
Well, thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, so much.
Thank you, Helen. It's been a
Bye,
pleasure.
everybody.
Take care.
Everybody.
Everybody.
Great to see
Bye.
people.
Lisa, I haven't seen you in 20 years.
Bye now.
Care.
Good to see everybody.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
David.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.